If you're a regular viewer of my channel and you watch my monologues and my interviews, you'll know that the last 10 months or so have been quite a journey for me. Some of you have been interested in watching me awaken and broaden my horizons and in understand what's been going on. Many people have said to me, Richard, you've managed to understand and awaken to some of the very odd things that are happening in this world in such a short time, where other people had been awake at 20 years and had taken it in slowly, whereas mine's been a sort of very rapid effect. And it does feel like that. However, at the very beginning of this process, I was told, as you may have seen in a recent video, to entertain everything, to be open to a lot of ideas that might come. I read a book called 180 Degrees by Fergus Greenwood. It's a tome of a book, but I thoroughly recommend it to anybody who hasn't seen it. You can get it online, of course. And that gave me a grounding of what's going on. I couldn't put the thing down. And I started to realize that some of the questions that I'd had in the past, things like what was the truth behind 9/11, the moon landings and those sort of things, JFK, were they as just a load of stories that people were pushing around, or was there grains of truth in it? And of course, I've now formed my opinion on that, and you can probably guess what they are. For a lot of people, the biggest problem that they've had to face was when we were locked down and trying to understand why, up until then, mostly a kind, benevolent, philanthropic, generous government, he says with his tongue firmly in his cheek, but why the authorities would go to that extreme with their people. And then why would that be followed up with this bizarre idea of following one side of the coin with science, with a certain medical intervention that was going to be put in, this syringe of hope that we were all told was going to be the wonder cure. And the extremes that the mainstream media that were in lockstep with the government. A lot of people were questioning that, but society made it impossible to even flush out whether that was a good policy or not, because so many people had been hypnotized, if you like, or programmed by the authority figures, whether they were in the government or whether they were on television or on social media, advising you to take this particular substance. And many people did take that substance and have now regretted it, and they've seen the after effects of this dreadful policy. And some people have just struggled to understand that possibly a government and mainstream media would have known that these things were not as beneficial as they seemed to be at the time. People have struggled that there would be a cabal of people who are hell-bent on reducing the population in a very swift and somewhat egregious way. And in the process of my awakening and my journey through the videos that I've been producing, I've had the pleasure and the honour of talking to a number of guests who have challenged what I thought was possible. People talking about telepathy, talking about the sovereignty of the individual, that we are not in a corporate world really, but that we're individuals, that there is a constitution that makes sense, that the governments aren't really abiding by it, that some of the legislation is out of kilter with itself, that there is no contract for the council tax. And then, of course, there's all the different types of understanding about health and whether viruses even exist and what our body is doing when it detoxes. And then, of course, there's much more on the thing about UFOs. We're slowly seeing disclosure of so-called UFOs. happening, and that the American military have been in conversation with them, we are led to believe. And then there's all the horrific stories that might happen, the idea that we may be attacked by UFOs. And possibly this is not actually the UFOs doing this, but it's a government plan. And the government is being held to ransom, if you like, by players behind it. We've heard in the instance of these 10 months that there are bankers from the Bank of International Settlements. There is an almost Illuminati of bankers who are payrolling things, payrolling wars on both sides. So it doesn't matter who wins and who dies, they still get rich. That so many of the illusions of our life has been created by the Illuminati. We've also learnt that the royal family is perhaps not as genuine or even royal as we may think. We are being challenged, I certainly have, and I know many of my viewers have, over the last 10 months. And I can see that in the emails that I have, and of course in the comments that people put. And some of the guests perhaps have been more challenging for some people than others. And I've taken the attitude that the guests who I bring onto the show have something to say. It's not for me to act like a journalist from the BBC, paid to challenge them and see if they're lying or making it up. I feel that the audience is an astute bunch of people. So with my guests, I say to them, look, I'm going to give you a length of rope, and if you hang yourself by it, so be it. And the guests take that challenge because they wish to explain what they believe in. And many of the audience, I know, find that very difficult sometimes. And it's interesting to see how intolerant some people can be to some of the guests. And I explain that often to the guests, that people might find what they say challenging, and I do as well. But it is good to be able to listen to other people's point of views. You see, we've started to move into a world, I think, more principally since the Brexit debate and then the wokeism that has come in, where people find that if you have an opinion and it's different to the mainstream narrative, then you're an idiot. You can't be challenged on the substance of the opinion, but you're challenged on the person saying it. You're insulted by being an idiot. You're ugly or fat or stupid or whatever it might be, rather than actually the detail of the opinion itself, which then makes anybody else listening to that challenge sound as if it makes that person giving those insults, they're very shallow because they can't challenge the substance. And I find that fascinating. But we, at the moment, with some of the challenges that I feel that are going to come down the line to us in the near future, we're going to have to be able to entertain things that we really don't necessarily understand. Because when these things happen, we may find our upside down world turn even more. It seems to me that we're in a chess game. And as we play this game, certain moves that we will not have seen will be being played out, and we will be put back potentially in fear again when we have no reason to be in fear. We ought to be able to see through some of these things that are going to come our way. And these things may come our way through those what we think are trusted sources. The government, for example, although who these days actually trusts the government, which is a good situation to be in, because we should challenge everything. We should entertain it, listen, and then work out for ourselves whether it is good advice or bad advice, a good subject or a bad subject, a good opinion worth listening to, or one that we disagree with. But we should at least listen and entertain it. And then we can make our decision. Is it ideal to have 5G rolled out across the country? Will those electromagnetic frequencies do us good or do us damage? These are some of the questions that I feel that we're going to have to start to ask and be prepared to challenge what the status quo is. So on this journey of these 10 months, I feel that I'm much more prepared to listen, to have things thrown at me, that I am beginning to take back that responsibility of my own mind. Whereas I feel the government and the mainstream media have spent a long time programming me to simply obey and accept what they say. But now I don't. I'll listen, I'll entertain what they say, but I'll make up my own mind. Thank you very much.